They fired me at 8:32 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because that's when my badge stopped working. 21 years of building their systems, and they cut me loose one day before retirement. By 9:01 a.m., every computer in the company was locked down. By noon, they'd lost $3 billion in market cap. By evening, the CEO who fired me was cleaning out his desk. You want to know how I did it? I didn't. I just walked away and let the system I built do what it was designed to do. Let me back up and tell you how this whole thing started. My name's Maxwell Brennan. Max to everyone who knows me. 52 years old, divorced, got a kid named Alex studying computer science at State. I spent 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers before landing at Gentry Bank back in 2003. Started as a junior systems engineer, worked my way up to senior systems architect. Here's the thing most people don't understand about bank computer systems. They're not just software running on servers. They're the nervous system of the entire financial institution. Every transaction, every security check, every failsafe that keeps people's money safe, that's all code. And for 21 years, that code was mine. I didn't just maintain Gentry's systems, I built them from scratch. Every security protocol, every backup procedure, every line of code that processes nearly $20 billion in daily transactions. Not legally mine, maybe, but I knew every circuit, every pathway, every potential weakness better than I knew my own house. Then Tyler Brooks showed up. Tyler's 36, Stanford MBA, talks about disruption and digital transformation like they're magic spells. The board ate it up. Young guy, fresh ideas, full of energy about modernizing everything. Problem was, he didn't understand how anything actually worked. I remember our first meeting. Tyler called it a systems optimization sink. I called it Tuesday. Max, he said, standing at the whiteboard with a marker like he was about to solve world hunger. We need to move fast. Break things, iterate, find efficiencies. Tyler, I said, this isn't a startup. People's mortgages run through these systems. You can't just break things and see what happens. He gave me that Silicon Valley smile. That's exactly the kind of legacy thinking we need to disrupt. Legacy thinking. 21 years of keeping the bank running was legacy thinking. That's when I knew where this was heading. Over the next 2 years, Tyler brought in his people, young programmers with computer science degrees and zero real-world experience. They'd sit in meetings talking about technical debt and code refactoring without understanding that some of that old code was there for very good reasons. Like what happened back in 2009. I found anomalies buried deep in the transaction logs, patterns that pointed to internal money laundering. When I brought it to the executive board, they thanked me, buried the report, and within a week I was suddenly uninvited to strategy meetings. That's when I first wrote Guardian. It wasn't meant as a weapon. It was insurance, a dead man's switch built into the core authentication system. As long as I remained employed and transitioned normally to retirement, everything would run fine. But if I was ever forcibly removed without proper knowledge transfer, the system would protect itself. I embedded it deep in the authentication protocols, disguised as routine security code. Nobody else knew about it. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I believed people would do the right thing when it mattered. Guess I was wrong about that. The writing was on the wall for months. Tyler kept bringing in consultants to assess our infrastructure needs. Translation: figure out how to replace the old guy. I'd sit in meetings where 20-somethings with fresh degrees would explain how my 20-year-old systems were inefficient and non-scalable. Max, Tyler said during one particularly painful presentation, we really value your institutional knowledge, but we need to think about succession planning. Succession planning. Like I was some kind of pharaoh building a tomb. I tried to play ball. I wrote documentation. I created training materials. I even volunteered to mentor the new hires. But Tyler's team wasn't interested in learning how things worked. They wanted to tear everything down and rebuild it their way. 3 months ago, Tyler started scheduling meetings without me. Important meetings about system architecture and security protocols. When I asked about it, his assistant would say they were preliminary discussions that didn't require my input yet. Last month, I caught wind of a consulting contract with some firm called Digital Dynamics. Their proposal was to completely replace Gentry's core banking system within 18 months. When I asked Tyler about it, he said it was just exploratory research. 2 weeks ago, I submitted my retirement paperwork. 21 years, 4 months, and 6 days of service. I was supposed to finish out the month, train my replacement, and ride off into the sunset with my pension intact. Instead, I'm sitting in my kitchen at 9 in the morning, looking at a termination letter dated today. The morning started normal enough. I stopped by the coffee shop, bought donuts for the IT crew like I'd been doing every Tuesday for the past 5 years. Figured it would be one of my last chances to do something nice for the people who'd worked under me all these years. I walked into the building, badge in hand, ready for what I thought would be another ordinary day. Instead, Tyler was waiting in the lobby with his fake smile and a piece of paper. "Max," he said, not even offering a handshake. "We need to talk." He handed me the letter. Effective immediately. Strategic restructuring. Position eliminated. Standard corporate speak for "we don't need you anymore, old man." "That's it?" I asked. "We appreciate your service," Tyler said, already looking at his phone. "HR will handle the transition details. 21 years, and they couldn't even wait one more day." I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't make a scene. I just folded the letter, put it in my jacket pocket, and walked to the exit. Scanned my badge one last time. The light blinked green and then red, and I was done. What Tyler didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my termination at exactly 8:32 a.m. had just triggered something I'd built into the system 15 years ago. Guardian was awake. I drove home in my old F-150, windows down, not really thinking about anything except how quiet the world seemed. 21 years of getting up at 6, fighting traffic, dealing with corporate nonsense, and suddenly I had nowhere to be. My house is nothing fancy. Ranch style, 3 bedrooms, garage converted into a woodworking shop. I bought it after the divorce, figured I'd live there until retirement. Guess that timeline just got accelerated. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at that termination letter one more time. Strategic restructuring. What a load of garbage. They restructured me right out of 21 years of my life. That's when my phone buzzed. Text from Alex. "Dad, saw something on the news about Gentry. Everything okay?" News. I flipped on the TV. Breaking news. Gentry Bank experiencing widespread system failures across multiple states. ATM networks down, online banking unavailable. I checked my watch. 9:47 a.m. Guardian had been active for exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. Here's how Guardian worked. It wasn't a virus or malware or anything Hollywood would dream up. It was a conditional authentication protocol embedded in the core system architecture. Simple concept. As long as my employee credentials remained valid and I was scheduled for normal retirement, everything functioned normally. But the moment my access got revoked unexpectedly, like it did at 8:32 this morning, the system would start rejecting administrative override attempts. Not all at once. That would be too obvious. Guardian was subtle. It would accept routine transactions but lock out anyone trying to access core functions. And since Tyler's hotshot team didn't really understand the system architecture, they'd have no clue how to fix it. My phone rang. Katie Sullivan, one of the systems engineers I'd trained. "Max, what the hell is going on? We're locked out of everything." "What do you mean locked out? Every admin override is getting rejected. Error says insufficient credentials, but we're using the master access codes Tyler's office issued last month." I took a sip of coffee. "Have you tried the legacy authentication protocols? We can't access them. Everything's encrypted under your old signature." "Katie, I'm not an employee anymore. My credentials were revoked this morning." Long pause. "Max, is this connected to your termination?" "You're smart, Katie. You'll figure it out." I hung up and turned the volume up on the TV. The news was calling it a major system malfunction. They had no idea. By 10:30, it wasn't just Florida anymore. Reports were coming in from Ohio, Texas, California. ATMs showing service unavailable. Mobile banking apps timing out. Wire transfers suspended. The thing about bank computer systems is they're all connected. Not just within one bank, but between banks, with federal systems, with credit card networks. When a major player like Gentry goes down, it's like a traffic accident on the interstate. Everything backs up. Tyler called me at 11:15. I let it go to voicemail. He called again 5 minutes later. Then again. Finally, I answered. "What do you want, Tyler?" "Max, thank God. We need you to come in. There's been some kind of system malfunction and we can't, not my problem anymore. I don't work there, remember? Look, I know this morning was abrupt, but we can work something out. Reinstatement, consulting contract, whatever you need." "Tyler, you fired me. You revoked my credentials. Even if I wanted to help, I couldn't access the system." "What are you talking about?" "Guardian only responds to authorized personnel who were continuously employed at the moment of system activation. You made sure I wasn't authorized when you handed me that termination letter." Silence on the other end. "I warned you about this," I said. "In the white papers I wrote. In the security briefings you never bothered to attend. But nobody wanted to read the boring technical stuff." I hung up. The stock market noticed by noon. Gentry Bank Corporation stock dropped 8% in 30 minutes. Then 12%. Then the trading halt kicked in. I have to admit, I was curious how far this would go. Guardian was designed to be persistent but not destructive. It wouldn't delete data or steal money or anything criminal. It would just not cooperate, like a dog that refuses to come when called. But the secondary effects? Those were harder to predict. By 1 p.m., customer service phones were ringing nonstop. Social media was lighting up with complaints. Local news stations were interviewing frustrated customers standing outside locked-down ATMs. My neighbor Dave knocked on the door around 1:30. He works for a competing bank. "Max, you hear about Gentry? Whole system's down. Our phones are ringing off the hook with people wanting to switch accounts." "Yeah, I heard. Crazy, right? 21st century and a bank just stops working. Makes you wonder how secure any of this stuff really is." I nodded. "Makes you wonder?" Dave left and I went out to the garage. I had a dining table I'd been working on. Solid oak, traditional joinery, real craftsmanship, not the particle board garbage they sell nowadays. Working with wood was honest. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. My phone kept buzzing. Calls from Gentry, calls from former colleagues, even a call from some reporter who'd somehow gotten my number. I let them all go to voicemail. Around 3 p.m., Tyler called again. This time I answered on the first ring. "Max, please, the board is asking questions. Stock's down 18%. Customers are closing accounts. We need to fix this." "You want to fix it? You should have thought about that before you threw me out like yesterday's garbage. What do you want? Money? Equity? Name your price." "Tyler, you're not listening. Guardian isn't something I control anymore. It's automated. It activated the moment you terminated my employment, and now it's protecting the system from people it doesn't trust." "People it doesn't trust?" "People who fire the architect one day before his retirement." Another pause. "Max, if you don't help us fix this, the whole bank could go under. Thousands of jobs. Should have considered that earlier." I hung up again. The truth was, I felt bad about the regular employees. People like Katie, who'd worked hard and didn't deserve to suffer because Tyler was an idiot. But Guardian wasn't designed to hurt them. It was designed to protect the institution from people who would compromise its integrity. Sometimes protection looks like punishment. By 4 p.m., the news was calling it the worst banking system failure in decades. Financial analysts were on TV talking about systemic risk and confidence crisis. Competitor banks were running ads about stability and reliability. That evening, I got an email from Gentry's legal department. Subject line, "Urgent employment reinstatement offer." They were offering me everything. Full reinstatement, double my original pension, immediate return to work, executive consulting contract. Basically whatever I wanted if I would just make the bad computers start working again. I read it twice, then called the number on the letterhead. "This is Maxwell Brennan. I received your contract offer. Mr. Brennan, thank you for calling. We're prepared to meet any reasonable demands to resolve this situation. The contract's invalid." "Excuse me? Guardian isn't just a lock. It's a time-sensitive protocol. It only accepts override commands from authorized personnel who were continuously employed at the moment of activation. You terminated my authorization at 8:32 this morning. You can't bring me back to a moment that's already passed." Dead silence on the other end. I tried to explain this in the documentation, but Tyler was too busy disrupting things to learn how they actually worked. That night, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the news coverage. They were calling it everything from a cyber attack to a computer meltdown. None of them understood what was really happening. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. By Thursday morning, it wasn't just a banking story anymore. It was everywhere. CNN, Fox Business, even the late-night talk shows were making jokes about the bank that forgot how to bank. Social media was having a field day. #GentryDown was trending. Someone had made a meme of Tyler's headshot with the caption, "This is fine," while everything burned around him. I was drinking coffee and reading the news on my tablet when Alex called. "Dad, you're famous." "What do you mean?" TechCrunch just published an article. "The engineer who built a better mousetrap. They found your old emails." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What emails?" "That security memo you sent to the board back in 2015. Someone leaked it." "Dad, the whole tech industry is talking about you." I hung up and Googled my name. Sure enough, there it was. TechCrunch, Wired, Ars Technica, even the Wall Street Journal. They'd all picked up the story. The email they found was one I'd sent after that money laundering incident. Subject line, "Ethical safeguards and critical infrastructure." In it I'd written, "If we ever reach a point where our systems outpace our ethics, I will have failed in my duty as an architect. I have embedded safeguards, not for personal protection, but for institutional integrity. Should leadership ever choose expediency over ethics, the system will simply stop trusting them." Suddenly, this wasn't about a disgruntled employee sabotaging his former company. This was about an engineer who'd built ethical guardrails into a financial system. and management that had fired him for doing his job too well. The narrative flipped overnight. Young programmers started sharing quotes from my email on Twitter. The system will simply stop trusting them became a rallying cry. Tech blogs wrote articles about embedded ethics and architect activism. Someone even made t-shirts. But the real bombshell came Friday afternoon. I was in the garage putting the finishing touches on that oak table when my phone rang. Unknown number with a 202 area code, Washington, D.C. Mr. Brennan, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Federal Reserve's Cybersecurity Division. We need to talk. Turns out 3 other banks had been calling the Fed all week, worried about their own systems. If Gentry could go down this easily, what about everyone else? They wanted to know if their systems had similar vulnerabilities. Mr. Brennan, we've reviewed the technical specifications of what you call Guardian. We're wondering if other institutions might have similar safeguards. I can't speak for other banks, I said, but I can tell you that any competent systems architect builds in protection mechanisms. The question is whether management bothers to understand them. That same afternoon, Gentry's legal team made a discovery that changed everything. They'd been digging through old contracts and intellectual property filings, trying to find some legal angle to force me back to work. Instead, they found something that made their situation 10 times worse. Back in 2014, I'd filed patents on the core Guardian architecture under my own company, Brennan Systems, LLC. Not under Gentry's IP umbrella, my own patents. Every version of their banking system running on my logic since 2014 had been operating under license. A license with very specific terms, including what lawyers call a moral clause that voided usage rights if the original architect was terminated without cause. They hadn't just lost their architect. They'd never owned the blueprint. Tyler found out about the patents at the same time the board did. I wasn't there, obviously, but Katie told me about it later. Apparently, he went white as a sheet and started muttering about legal exposure and fiduciary responsibility. The board called an emergency meeting Friday evening. By Saturday morning, Tyler Brooks was no longer CEO of Gentry Bank Corporation. The official announcement said he was pursuing other opportunities. The unofficial story, according to my sources still inside the company, was that he'd been escorted out by security after a screaming match with the chairman. His replacement was Margaret Chen, the former COO who'd actually understood what I did for a living. First thing she did was call me. Max, it's Margaret. I know things have been complicated, but we need to find a way forward. I liked Margaret. She'd always treated me with respect, asked good questions, actually read the reports I wrote. But she was calling 3 days too late. Margaret, I appreciate the call, but Guardian activated on Tuesday morning. There's no going backward. What if we could restore your employment retroactively? Legally speaking, Margaret, you can't retroactively change the timestamp on a computer system. Guardian locked out unauthorized users at 8:32 a.m. on Tuesday. That moment is carved in stone. She was quiet for a long time. Max, is there anything we can do? The bank is hemorrhaging customers. Stock's down 40%. We're facing a potential acquisition by our biggest competitor. You could try building a new system from scratch. Might take you 2 or 3 years. And cost $500 million minimum. Assuming you can find architects who understand financial infrastructure well enough to build something secure. Another long pause. Max, I'm sorry. About Tyler, about how this was handled. You deserved better. I appreciate that, Margaret. I really do. But apologies don't restart computer systems. The weekend brought more revelations. Investigative reporters started digging into Tyler's background, his hiring, his management style. They found the Slack messages where he'd called me deadweight and legacy baggage. They found emails about the plan to replace me with a team of junior developers at half the cost. They also found something else. Tyler had been negotiating a deal to sell Gentry's customer data to third-party marketing companies. Nothing illegal, technically, but the kind of thing that would have made customers very unhappy if they'd known about it. Monday morning brought the final twist. I was reading the paper when I saw a small item buried on the business page. Apex Federal Technologies announces major banking infrastructure contract. Apex was a smaller regional bank, but they had a reputation for ethical business practices and conservative management. The kind of place that prioritized stability over quarterly growth targets. An hour later, my phone rang. Mr. Brennan? This is Richard Morrison, CEO of Apex Federal. I was wondering if you might be interested in a conversation. What kind of conversation? The kind where we talk about building banking systems the right way. Systems that protect customers instead of exploiting them. Systems that prioritize integrity over profit margins. He wanted to meet for lunch. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Mr. Morrison, I'm retired. I understand. But what if retirement looked different than you thought it would? Tuesday afternoon, I drove to Apex's headquarters. Small building, maybe 50 employees, but clean and professional. Morrison was probably 60, gray hair, firm handshake, the kind of guy who looked you in the eye when he talked. Max, he said, we've been following your situation. What happened at Gentry was wrong. But more than that, it was stupid. They threw away 21 years of institutional knowledge because some MBA thought he could optimize his way to better profits. We talked for 2 hours about banking, about technology, about the responsibility that comes with handling other people's money. Morrison understood something Tyler never did, that the most important feature of any financial system isn't speed or efficiency. It's trust. We'd like to offer you a position, Morrison said. Senior Principal Architect. Your job would be to build the next generation of ethical banking infrastructure. Systems that protect themselves and their users from people who would compromise them. What's the catch? No catch. We want to do this right. We want to build something that lasts. Something that can't be corrupted by the next hotshot MBA who thinks he knows better than the people who built it. I looked out the window at Apex's small parking lot, their modest building, their 4-branch network. Not much compared to Gentry's national presence, but sometimes small and solid beats, big and shaky. When do I start? I started at Apex Federal on a Monday morning in October. Walking into their small building felt like stepping back in time, not to outdated technology, but to a place where people actually cared about doing things right. My first project was designing a new core banking system from scratch, not updating or patching or optimizing some existing mess, but building something clean and secure from the ground up. Morrison gave me a team of 6 engineers, all of them hungry to learn, none of them fresh out of business school with ideas about disrupting the financial industry. Our philosophy is simple, Morrison told the team during our first meeting. We're not trying to be the biggest bank or the fastest growing bank. We're trying to be the bank that's still here in 50 years. That's the kind of thinking that gets systems built right. 3 months in, we had a working prototype. 6 months in, we were running pilot programs. The system was fast, secure, and most importantly, transparent. Every transaction logged, every access tracked, every administrative action recorded and auditable. I built in safeguards, of course, but these weren't hidden tripwires designed to punish bad actors. They were visible, documented features that any competent engineer could understand and maintain. The difference between a security system and a revenge system is transparency. Alex graduated that spring and joined our team as a junior developer. Watching him work reminded me why I'd gotten into engineering in the first place. He wasn't interested in disrupting anything. He just wanted to build things that worked. Meanwhile, Gentry Bank was dying a slow public death. Without their core systems, they'd been forced to process everything manually. Customer service wait times stretched into hours. Online banking stayed down for weeks. By Christmas, they'd lost 60% of their customer base. The acquisition rumors turned out to be true. First National bought Gentry's assets for about 30 cents on the dollar in February. Most of the employees were laid off. The Gentry name disappeared from bank branches across the country. Margaret Chen landed on her feet, got hired as CTO at a credit union in Colorado. Katie Sullivan came to work for us at Apex. Most of Tyler's hotshot programmers found jobs at tech startups, where breaking things and iterating fast is actually appropriate. Tyler himself, that took a little longer to sort out. For months after Gentry collapsed, he kept a low profile. No LinkedIn updates, no conference speaking, no startup announcements. Then, in March, I heard he'd landed a consulting gig with a cryptocurrency exchange. Perfect fit, really. An industry built on hype and speculation, where nobody's entirely sure how anything works or whether it's legal. But Tyler couldn't leave well enough alone. In May, he published an article on Medium titled Lessons Learned from Legacy System Failures. In it, he blamed Gentry's collapse on outdated infrastructure and resistance to modernization efforts. He painted himself as a visionary leader brought down by stubborn old-timers who couldn't adapt to change. He never mentioned Guardian by name, but he wrote about hidden vulnerabilities and undocumented system dependencies that created single points of failure. The article got some attention in Silicon Valley circles. A few venture capitalists shared it. Some startup bros nodded along about the need to disrupt traditional banking. But the tech industry has a long memory, and most working engineers knew the real story. The response was swift and brutal. Former Gentry employees posted detailed rebuttals. Security researchers analyzed Tyler's claims and found them technically nonsensical. Even some of the VCS who'd originally shared his article quietly deleted their posts. My favorite response came from a systems architect at JP Morgan Chase. Calling Guardian a hidden vulnerability is like calling a burglar alarm a hidden vulnerability in your home security system. It only looks like a problem if you're the burglar. That's when Tyler called me. I was in my workshop on a Saturday afternoon teaching Alex how to use a mortise chisel when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Max, it's Tyler. Tyler Brooks. I set down the chisel. What do you want, Tyler? I was hoping we could talk. Clear the air, you know? Maybe grab coffee sometime. Clear the air about what? About what happened at Gentry. The whole situation got out of hand. I think there were misunderstandings on both sides. Both sides. Like my 21 years of faithful service was somehow equivalent to his 18 months of incompetent management. Tyler, there was no misunderstanding. You fired me one day before retirement because you thought you could replace me with cheaper programmers. It blew up in your face. Max, come on. The business environment was changing. We had to make hard decisions. You made stupid decisions. You fired the one person who understood how your systems worked and then acted surprised when they stopped working. Long pause. Look, I know you're still angry. I'm not angry, Tyler. I'm disappointed. You had a chance to learn something, to actually understand the systems you were managing. Instead, you decided that 21 years of experience was legacy thinking that needed to be disrupted. That's not, you never read my documentation. You never attended my briefings. You never bothered to learn how the infrastructure actually functioned. And when it all fell apart, you blamed everyone except yourself. Another pause. Max, what do you want me to say? That I was wrong? Fine, I was wrong. But people make mistakes. Shouldn't there be room for second chances? I looked out the workshop window at Alex, who was practicing his chisel technique on a piece of scrap oak. Patient, careful, learning how to do things right. Tyler, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to value your MBA theories over institutional knowledge. You chose to fire experienced people instead of learning from them. You chose speed over stability, disruption over competence. So what, I'm supposed to be blacklisted forever? One bad decision ruins my entire career. Tyler, your career is fine. You're consulting for crypto exchanges, writing articles about innovation and disruption. You landed on your feet, just like you always do. But the reputation damage, you want to know about reputation damage? Talk to the 2,000 Gentry employees who lost their jobs when the bank collapsed. Talk to the customers who couldn't access their money for weeks. Talk to the shareholders who lost 40% of their investment. Silence. Tyler, you called this conversation to clear the air. Here's the clear air. You're a smart guy with good intentions who got in over his head and made some very expensive mistakes. Learn from them. But don't expect me to pretend they didn't happen. I hung up. Alex looked up from his woodworking. Was that the guy who fired you? Yeah. What did he want? Forgiveness, I think. You going to give it to him? I picked up my chisel and looked at the piece we were working on. Solid walnut, beautiful grain, the kind of wood that gets better with age if you treat it right. Forgiveness is different from trust, I said. I can forgive Tyler for being young and stupid and overconfident, but I'll never trust him to run anything more complicated than a lemonade stand. Alex nodded and went back to work. Smart kid, he understood the difference. 6 months later, Apex Federal won a contract to provide banking services to 3 federal credit unions. Our new system processed the migration flawlessly. 2 million accounts, 0 data loss, 0 downtime. The industry noticed. Banking technology conferences started inviting me to speak about ethical system design. Computer science programs asked me to guest lecture about the responsibility that comes with building critical infrastructure. I usually said yes, not because I wanted fame or recognition, but because the next generation of engineers needed to understand something. Code isn't just logic and algorithms. It's values and principles written in a language that machines can understand. When you build something that other people depend on, whether it's a banking system or a bridge or a pacemaker, you're not just solving technical problems. You're taking responsibility for the consequences of your choices. Some people call what I did to Gentry revenge. I call it accountability. I didn't attack anyone. I didn't steal anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I just built a system that refused to trust people who'd broken faith with its creator. Guardian did exactly what it was designed to do. Protect the integrity of the institution from those who would compromise it for short-term gain. The real lesson isn't about clever code or hidden safeguards. It's about something much simpler. If you're going to build something that lasts, you better make sure it's built by people who understand the difference between disruption and destruction. These days, I work 3 days a week at Apex, spend the other 2 in my workshop. Alex is leading his own projects now, building systems with the same careful attention to detail I tried to teach him. The next generation gets it in ways Tyler's generation never did. You build something right, with integrity and purpose, and it'll outlast the people who try to break it. That's not revenge. That's just good engineering.